All right, we're going to get started. Good morning, everyone from Colorado Springs. We welcome you to today's program. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jamie Beckett, and I am the manager of our International Visitor Program here at the Colorado Springs World Affairs Council. And I'd like to welcome you to our day's program titled U.S. Cybersecurity Reaches Romania. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the supporters of the Council, the Tiemens Foundation, the Wells Fargo Private Bank, the Richard Petritz Foundation, Mackenzie Place, and also our institutional members, El Primar Foundation, Colorado College, University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, Pikes Peak Community College, Colorado Springs Chamber and EDC, SIVA Charter High School, and the Fountain Valley School. Before we really get into this and I introduce the speakers, I would like to let you know, and I'm sure so many people are on Zoom calls now, they already know, but there are a few functions that will help you ask questions, and those are at the bottom of the screen. There is a chat function for general comments, and those can be seen by the panelists, myself, and the audience. There's also a Q&A function to write your written questions in, and if you'd like, you can use the raise hand function to ask your questions verbally to the panelists. We will wait until the end of the discussion to get to those questions, so I just ask that you please be patient. And with that, I would like to introduce today's speakers. We have Iulian Alecu from Romania. He has been the Deputy Director General of the Romanian National Center for Reaction at Cyber Incidents since March 2018. He began working in the field of cybersecurity in 2010. His experience covers topics of detection, intelligence, investigation of cyber attacks and attackers, threat intelligence and analysis, and he is working on developing international cooperation in cybersecurity at the European and international levels with important results at the operational as well as strategic levels. Institutional building is also an important part of his activities. In his career, he has worked on building up operational and strategical structures in Romania. Our second panelist is Jerry Chappie, who has two primary roles. He is the cybersecurity lead for the Rocky Mountain region for the Army 75th Innovation Command under the Army Futures Command. In this role, he and his team search out new tools, both hardware and software, and processes and procedures that can be fast-tracked from the civilian development cycle into the Department of Defense. This is his Army Reserve's colonel position. In his second role, he is the cybersecurity lead for the U.S. Space Force Satellite Control Network. He and his team perform cybersecurity risk assessments and improvements on all ground stations, systems, and communication links around the world. He is one of 4 creators for the certification for Chief Information Security Officers. That is a global certification that establishes a baseline for cybersecurity knowledge and practices to support and defend an organization's data and intellectual property. He meets with Chief Information Security Officers from industries around the world on a bi-weekly basis to discuss current cyber threats and attacks that they are seeing. Chappie is returned recently from a 1-year Army assignment to the U.S. European Command leading Joint Cybersecurity Center that manages all U.S. networks and sites and works closely with all NATO and partner mission countries across Europe. He has spoken at many international cybersecurity forums across Europe representing the European Command. So with that, we are going to get started. Thank you both for being with us today. It is about 6 p.m., I believe, in Romania right now. So that should be after hours. Is that correct, Julian?
Yes. Good evening, everybody from Romania.
Appreciate your time
You're welcome.
off the clock here to be with us.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
So what I would like to do first is I would like to describe to everybody what the International Visitor Leadership Program is. And the reason why we're talking about this is because Iulian is actually an alumni of this program. So we call this the IVLP for short. So you'll be hearing it both as the International Visitor Leadership Program, but also called the IVLP. So the IVLP is the U.S. State Department's premier professional exchange program. It's administered and funded through the State Department's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. So through short-term visits to the U.S., current and emerging leaders throughout the world come to the U.S. for firsthand experiences and cultivating relationships with their American counterparts. So they're here for professional meetings to meet with their peers in the US, but they're also here to learn about the vast culture and deep culture of the United States. So each year, nearly 5,000 international visitors come to the US through the International Visitor Leadership Program, and more than 200,000 international visitors have engaged with Americans through the IVLP. And that includes more than 500 current or former chiefs of state or heads of government. And as an example, Margaret Thatcher was an alumni or is an alumni of this program. So the IVLP this year is 80 years old, and the State Department is celebrating this 80 years of continued success through the program. You might see, if you follow our social media accounts, we are highlighting or helping the State Department highlight 80 faces from the program as a way to highlight the tremendous and lasting work these alumni are doing. So how do we fit into the picture of this program? So our council, as well as many councils throughout the US, they liaise with the State Department to help find the extraordinary professionals in different fields to meet with these emerging leaders that are coming over to the US. So we highlight different leaders in different sectors, throw that over to the State Department, and they choose who these international leaders are going to meet with. So that's our part of this. And as you might guess, because the pandemic is playing out as it is, we have not been seeing any in-person exchanges or delegations right now. And unfortunately, we're not going to through the rest of the year. They have all been postponed. The State Department is moving into the virtual realm like many folks are. And so we will be helping them connect people virtually through this program. And hopefully they'll be able to come maybe next year, sooner than later, we're hoping. So this program today kind of stemmed from that pause in the International Visitor Leadership Program. So we are connecting with past alumni to talk about this exchange program, the significance of the program, why it's important to them, to the US and to the world as a diplomacy tool, and then to also hear what's happening around the world because of the pandemic. But we will also be speaking to both Iulian and Jerry about their fields, which is cybersecurity, talking about the countries where crossover might be and how those are being counteracted. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of what the International Visitor Leadership Program is. And with that, I would like to give it up to Iulian to talk about his experience a little bit. And how I would like to begin this is to ask you, how and why were you chosen to participate in this program? Can you tell us the process of selection for these international visitors?
Yeah, so I was chosen. Hello, everyone, first of all, and again, good evening and good morning. And it's nice to meet you. And I really miss Colorado Springs. It was one of the most interesting and beautiful experiences that we have in US. The whole experience was great, and we have learned a lot of things. How and why I was chosen, it's because the Embassy of the United States in Bucharest have appointed me to participate in this delegation, and this is because the results and the experience that I have obtained in my profession so far, especially in the cybersecurity field. And they were sort of, scanning the Romanian society and looking for persons who are matching this thing of IVLP, visitors and leadership in the same time, and they have chosen me to participate in this program. So it's a short story and the short answer for this question.
Thank you, Iulian. Can you tell us a little bit about the delegation? It was a rather large delegation that you were involved in. Can you tell us who that was, where these folks were coming from?
Yeah, so the delegation I was part of took place in August 2019, between the 3rd and the 24th. And the delegation had representation from all over the world. That means from all over the continents. That means we have colleagues from Chile, Dominican Republic, Hungary, Israel, Italy, Kyrgyz Republic, Lebanon, Liberia, Mali, Namibia, Nigeria, Qatar, Romania, it was me, Tanzania, Thailand, Uruguay, Vietnam, and Zimbabwe. There were about 3 persons per continent. which created a really, really very interesting experience in order to know all this culture, to know the civilization, to know the way that they think, to know that they work, and to exchange a lot of experiences. So, and we still have our WhatsApp group. We exchange information, we talk to each other, we say hey to each other, we help each other, we work together on bilateral projects. So it's been an amazing, amazing experience.
Can you tell us what cities you traveled to? So your program was 3 weeks long, I believe.
Yeah.
They typically are 3 weeks, and so these visitors are traveling throughout the U.S. to stop in different cities and different professionals. Can you tell us where you stopped?
Yes, so we had the chances to visit a few states. We began with a visit in Washington, D.C., where we stayed about 3 days, and there we have met a lot of institutions and private companies that work with the state. Then we split from there in 3 groups. Part of us went to Charlotte in North Carolina for 2 or 3 days. I think it was 3 days. Another part went to Cleveland, Ohio, and another part which I was belonging to went in Indianapolis, Indiana, where we had also a very interesting experience because we have seen the Purdue University and talked there to the people. We have seen also some of the projects that they have developed there in order to create the possibility for the education of the young people who want to work in cybersecurity. After Indianapolis, we gathered together again and have visited Austin, Texas, then San Francisco, California, and then the last but not least, it was Colorado Springs. And then from Denver, we have left to Europe and to our home.
So Colorado Springs was your stopping point, and we've actually hosted a number of delegations for cybersecurity. Yeah. And I'm going to have Jerry talk a little bit about why why Colorado Springs is a stopping point for cybersecurity. But before we get into that, can you tell us what the highlights of your trip were? Maybe different highlights in different cities.
The trip was very enriching for all of us, starting with the places we have seen. And here I can say that we had the chance to see the capital, then part of the East Coast, and then we have moved to the southern area, where it was very hot. Even for the guys who were from Qatar, it was very hot, and for us too. Then we have moved to the West Coast, and last but not least, we have visited the Colorado Springs. Another interesting part was the people we met. There were people from different institutions of the state, people from private companies, people from universities, people who offered us home hospitality. All of them with a lot of experiences and a lot of knowledge, specific and innovative skills, which represented a very important input for us and for me as a visitor. Regarding the highlights, I think one of the most important is the fact that every region we have visited has a specific problems regarding the cybersecurity domain as a whole. And the people we have met together with their teams have identified and developed a solution for those problems. So the first highlight for me is there are different types of complex problems, but there is always a solution as long as you use your brain, have confidence, and work with the team. Another highlight is the way that the US developed the culture of cooperation. I have seen very important and interesting projects where private institutions, state, and academia work together and have remarkable results. This is one of the main takeaways for me, which I already worked to put it in practice here. So these were 2 main highlights. They contained a lot of, small things, but in essence, this is what. There is always a solution if you think and if you cooperate and if you work, and there is always a very good model in US that can be also adapted in our country and in Europe.
Iulian, can you talk about, oh, sorry.
Yes, sure. Please.
Can you talk about your plans for collaboration with maybe your peers or the folks that you met while you're here in the US?
Yeah, so after I have returned home after this nice experience and very enriching experience, I said, okay, we have to try to develop here in Europe and in Romania a model similar to what we have seen in the US, and this is specifically because we need resources, we need human resources, very good, educated, and prepared human resources in cybersecurity. And if you don't cooperate, state, private, and academia, there is always a problem because someone will take your resources. Either the academia, either the private, either the state will take the resources from the others. So if we don't work together, we will always have a problem. So first thing is to learn to work together. And I was thinking to a project where we can put universities, state institutions with responsibilities in cybersecurity and private companies, try to define our objective together, try to define a way of work together, and then try to develop in a very concrete way this project. We have some meetings last year in October and November. We have put on a paper all these projects, and we were thinking to begin to work on this January, February this year, and trying to connect with Colorado Springs University, Colorado Springs partners that we have seen already, and also to Purdue University. Unfortunately, we had this COVID problem that really made us and determined us to postpone all the things because the situation here, at least from the cybersecurity point of view, got very hot, and we are very few, so it was impossible to do the same, all these things in the same time. But now, September, October, we will try to get in touch with partners in Colorado Springs and Indianapolis, and then to try to develop and to connect our universities, those who will be willing, to your universities there, and to try to teach and to learn how this project could help a lot the preparation and education of the human resources.
Through your IVL experience, you were able to meet a lot of people across the U.S. and obviously throughout the world too, because of your delegation. So can you tell us why you feel the IVLP is an effective tool of diplomacy?
Oh, yes. Let me see. Let me see with what to begin. So first of all, for me, and I'm sure for this is the opinion of all the participants in the program, the fact that you can see with your own eyes, talk eye to eye to the people there, feel the atmosphere, the vibration of the people in the places, see the work that has been done there, the results, the projects in their complexity, things that cannot be done online, is the key to understand better and deepen the knowledge about the US and about the culture that the US has regarding the cooperation, regarding the human resources, regarding the cybersecurity. The fact that apart from the meetings, you can see also the streets, the other people that are not linked to the program. You can have a hamburger and a soda, for example, which for the European is something, you know, it's not usual to have the hamburger and the soda in the skirted heifer, for example, in Colorado Springs, in that restaurant. Yeah. Or you can buy a pair of boots and then use them in your country, as I have done, and I'm very proud of them. Or have a beer together with your colleagues means a lot. It opens a lot of new windows, it opens a lot of channels for communication, and offers a lot of new opportunities to see, to feel, and live a unique experience that would not be possible to have it virtually. And also seeing all this project that I have talked about, all these experiences, it's really helping, you know, people to get together, to understand that, you know, even if I'm from Europe and I'm thousands of kilometers or miles from you, at the end we have the same problems, we have the same goals, we have the same objectives, we have the same threats. And once we begin to work together and when we begin to talk together, that will help us more in understanding and counterfighting this cyber threat.
So one thing that I really love about this exchange program is it's a way to learn. It's a way for our local citizens to learn about the world, but vice versa, obviously. So all of these individuals are coming over to the United States to learn about our culture, our true culture, more than what is seen on TV or movies or in the newspaper. And that's a very lasting experience. And I think that it's also a very lasting experience for the folks that get to meet you all as a delegation. And if there are people who are listening on this call that are members of the World Affairs Council, or if you are in Colorado Springs and you would like to be a member, one of the highlights of being a member of the council is you have the opportunity to host these delegations in your home for a meal. And there's no better way to understand a person or a culture than to sit down with each other and have a meal. Like you were saying, Iulian, you know, at the Skirted
Yeah,
have for downtown in Colorado Springs.
yeah,
So the
that's true.
question I want to ask you, and I'm going to move over to some questions for Jerry, is can you give us an update on what's happening in Romania regarding the pandemic? How has everything played out thus far, and how you know is your work and family and life right now?
So yeah, it's impossible, and it's really impossible to talk about the whole situation in the country because it's very complex, and also you have seen in the newspapers and in the media, it's a lot of, you know, like in your country, a lot of problems that have appeared, and we had to tackle a lot of new situations that we were never thinking about. But from the cybersecurity point of view, it's that we can say that through our sensors and through our networks that we have developed, we have seen an increase of the attacks. It's about 6 times the increase of the attacks in our country, which was really worrying. So this is why we have taken a lot of measures to be sure that, especially in the awareness, especially in the education, to try to explain to the people and to try to prevent the materialization of the threats. And I can say that so far, most of our messages, most of our actions, most of the things that we have done have helped people in order not to be, you know, have stolen their data, not to be cheated by the criminals, by the cyber criminals, and so on. So it was an increase of the threats, an increase of the tools, and the increase of the everything that we have seen every day so far, which required a lot of activity and work from our side, and a lot of cooperation.
Thank you, Julian. I'm going to ask a couple questions of Jerry. So we were talking about earlier how Colorado Springs is a cybersecurity hub here in Colorado, and also and since you are an expert in cybersecurity, I'd like to know what your thoughts on are. You know, how did Colorado Springs become that hub?
Okay. First off, when you look at Colorado Springs and compare it to what the rest of the country, one of the big things that we have here that they don't have in most of the other places is a mixture of military, government personnel, and academia, with both the Air Force Academy, but also multiple universities right here in town. When you look at like Silicon Valley, they're primarily civilian side with a great deal of exchange, but very little security. When you look at like the DC area, it's very much government side, but very little civilian side in regards to entrepreneurship. Where here in Colorado Springs, we have a unique mixture of having 5 military bases or 4 military bases and a military university, plus other universities. And the military bases that we have here are at the very high level that manage the national defense systems and stuff. So with those military bases here and with the smaller population that we have here, everybody in Colorado Springs either is in the military, was in the military, or knows somebody that was. So their understanding of security is a lot higher here than it is in a lot of the other locations across the country, say like Chicago or Minneapolis. But then you take the feeders of that information or technology, people that are coming out of the universities that are feeding into the military facilities or into the DoD contracting companies and stuff like that. They're coming out of the universities very highly skilled in technology and have been using, sharing their information and stuff, but they've grown up in an environment that also has security as their primary concern. So we have a unique concept here of being able to share information securely, and it's grown from grassroots, not really grassroots, might not be the right term, but from the academia, from middle school to high school to university, on being able to share information securely. And that has exploded, might not be the right term, but has really grown with Colorado Springs as being a new hub for cybersecurity. Yes, Silicon Valley is a center for company development, but Colorado Springs really has the corner on the market for having secure cyber information exchange. And I believe it comes from having the background of multiple military bases. There's no place in Colorado Springs you can't look out and see Cheyenne Mountain, which from the movie War Games is the hub for ballistic missile defense for North America. So everybody sees that and everybody's reminded of the security and the importance of security from anywhere within the city of Colorado Springs. So I believe that's why we've become one of the number one hub for cybersecurity in the U.S.
So when Iulian was here last year, he visited the Catalyst campus and took a tour, and also went to the D11's cyber lab, where he met with different students who were learning cybersecurity tactics. And I think that because of our area as being such a hub, I think a lot of our students are being involved in that field. Do you think that's true?
Very much so. Plus, we have the National Cyber Center right here in town. There's a reason that the former governor and the former director of NSA and the CIA agreed on placing that facility here in Colorado Springs because of exactly what you're saying, that we've had STEM programs that are developing cybersecurity awareness and practices from middle school through high school, through Catalyst campus, through University of Colorado Springs and the Air Force Academy to be able to feed into that. So that's exactly why we're a hub for cybersecurity for the nation.
Thank you, Jerry. The other main question I want to ask you is, since you have worked with numerous European countries, are you finding that there are unique cyber threats and trends in different areas of the world? And if so, what are they? Or is everything pretty much overlapping?
Well, since we're just talking about COVID-19, there are some things that are very unique to the US that aren't being realized in the other countries as of yet. Part of that, well, the number one cause of that is the continued stimulus checks that are continuing to go out to everybody. And so many criminals are focusing on being able to get those checks from people with scams, and the phishing campaigns have gone up by 1,000% across the country with both individuals and in small businesses to be able to try and scam those checks out of the deserving people that are supposed to be getting them from the government. That's something that is a huge influx of money that wasn't in the economy or wasn't in the mail before. As far as continued phishing campaigns and other scams, those have continued, but the number of phishing campaigns for the stimulus surrounding the stimulus checks has really, really changed within the US. As far as outside of the US, we don't have that as much, but we do still have scams continuing for personal protective equipment. That's in every country. But I did notice a couple things also, though, that makes it a little bit different here, that makes it different over in Europe as opposed to here. When I was over there, I spent a lot of time, like Iulian was just mentioning, at sidewalk cafes and stuff in many of the different cities. And over there, I found that teenagers were talking about cybersecurity. They're talking about the IP addresses and stuff of their phones. Here in the US, you almost never hear a teenager talking about that. They're talking about the Kardashians or some sports figure or what Jordan's doing or LeBron James is doing this week or this month. They're not talking about cybersecurity. It hasn't even entered their minds. So that's a big, big difference that Europe has compared to what we have. So they're way ahead of us in a lot of those areas.
That's very interesting. So I'm going to ask some questions of the both of you. And since Jerry, you were just speaking, I'm going to have Iulian go first, and then you can chime in. So in your different areas, in what ways are hackers tracked down? And when those hackers are found, what's their punishment? But also, is there a way to use these criminal hackers for good? Have you experienced where hackers have been tracked down and then they have been thrown into the mix to be used for good?
Yeah, usually in, at least in Europe and in Romania, this thing or the tracking down of hackers, it's done by the police and other institutions with legal competencies in the field. But we will always cooperate with them. So when it comes to an attack or to mainly to cybercrime, where it's a lot of cybercrime going on there, we cooperate with them in order to also to identify the hackers. If they are turned the other way, it's difficult to say. It's very much about their mentality. It's very much about the way that they have been educated, grown up, and it's a very complex thing, narrative thing. But what we are doing instead, and we are doing this every day, we are looking for hacker mentality and skills. So it's not necessary to have a hacker that have performed some attacks and have been caught by the police. But once you have a guy, or you have, for example, you have teenagers, as Jerry said, that are very passionate of cybersecurity, and they are, you know, thinking like hackers. They have the mindset of a hacker, and they are able to, you know, to do what a hacker is doing. Those guys are very important for us because they will help us understand better the mindset of an attacker. They will help us understand the radiography of an attack, even if, you know, theoretically and also from the investigative point of view, have seen a lot of things. There is always something new. And what we look for, and we are more, we are sure that we can find these guys. It's the guys with the mindset of a hacker. These are, you know, safer, easier to be found, and more trustworthy.
Can I ask, why do you think the culture is different in young people and that they think about cybersecurity issues, whereas Jerry is saying that he's not seeing that as much in American youth?
That's for me.
Yes, that's for you, sorry. Yes.
Well, frankly, I cannot give you the answer. Why is that? Maybe because here in Europe, for example, the news regarding the cyber attacks, because it's all starting with the news. And as far as I'm concerned, starting with 2013, where we had the first attack that people were talking of, it was the Red October, the so-called Red October, that was published by the Kaspersky. From then time on, it was a lot of news regarding this area, regarding the cyber attacks. On the other hand, we had a lot of passionate, let's say, so-called hackers that had their forums and they had their meetings online and offline and so on. And I know that we have some, you know, annual meetings and annual conferences of the guys, of the teenagers, of the young people who are passionate of cybersecurity and are passionate of hacking and CTFs and so on, that they are meeting together and have a lot of events together. And they are, you know, a lot of technical events together. And they like to hang on and to talk about, as Jerry said, about the IPs, about the attacks, about the cybersecurity, about the measures and so on. So that thing, I think, you know, the news and the culture in the media, and then the passion of the people that, you know, okay, I have a PC, how can I enter in your PC? Or how can I do? It all started from very low levels, you know, from the passion, and then increased. And now I can say that it's true in Europe, we have a lot of, you know, movements. For example, the Swiss are doing a lot of, you know, annual exercises. We have teenagers from all over the Europe that are gathering together every year and have a CTF forum. So we have a lot of things going on. Every country had developed their own culture and their own capability in order to keep close these teenagers together and the young people. And maybe this is why, you know, there is this difference. But on the other hand, again, yeah, we have a lot of people that are passionate. It's true. But on the other hand, again, what I have seen in US, it's also a difference because US had the possibility and the vision to develop this framework of cooperation between the private and the state and academia, which you cannot see too much present here in Europe yet. Maybe because of the lack of, you know, or the difference of the laws and the difference of the legal perspective and so on. So there is a balance, okay? We have hackers, we have passionate people, but we also like some things.
Great, thank you. Jerry, can you tell us a little bit about how hackers are tracked here in the US? Maybe there's differences or overlaps, and then if you have heard of any ways these criminals have been utilized for good.
For the most part, in regards to being able to track down the hackers and stuff from here, it's pouring through mountains and mountains of data, being able to find small mistakes and stuff that they've made. But that generally takes months and months to find them. Famous attacks or hacks that we've had in the past, like the Office of Personnel Management and stuff, took upwards of 200 days to discover that it was even there. And one of the big problems that we have across the board is that most organizations, especially individuals, don't have a security team that's watching out for them. Yeah. So a hack will happen and it will be 6 months or 6 years before it's ever even discovered. But the only way to really focus in on the attackers is to discover what their actual motivation is. And once we can figure out what their motivation is, then we have a better chance of being able to get into them, into what they're doing, and being able to preempt or be able to get in front of their targets. That has started to work in some areas. It has definitely helped with nation state attacks, and it's starting to work with the phishing attacks in regards to the PPE and stuff. Obviously, the PPE phishing attacks has been out for 4 months or so, but if we're able to now start getting the word out, like Iulian was just saying, getting the news out to people to not accept unsolicited requests for information about that is a real big plus to get in front of those attacks. The problem is most organizations aren't doing that as of yet. One of the other big things, though, is that in order to be able to dig through all those piles and piles of data, it really takes a cooperation between the civilian organizations and government organizations to be able to get there, because of the computing power and because, like Iulian was mentioning, about the skill level of the person actually looking through those reams and reams of data. It takes a lot of work, and it's really, really difficult to say the least. But when we do find them, it's tracking them back, getting back to their originating country is one thing. Then we have to work through law enforcement and the FBI and the country to be able to actually locate them and arrest them. And then, unfortunately, most countries don't have any type of extradition treaties and things like that for computer crimes unless it's above a certain amount. So like the ones that we've discovered with OPM, and pick any of your other companies over the last 2 months that have been compromised, unless it's over a couple $1 million, they're really not going to do anything, unfortunately. When it comes to identity theft, and if you've been the subject of identity theft, that is a real pain that you're going to live with for the next 3 to 5 years that unfortunately you really can't do anything about. So that part is just saying that the sky is falling, but it's unfortunately, it's true, to try and get out from under that. How can these personnel be actually used for good? There's a few different ways. Right now, a lot of companies are putting out what's called bug bounties, and they're actually paying hackers to hack their systems. It's a novel idea, and it has actually been working. They've actually been able to improve their code. They've been able to improve their firmware. They've been able to discover callbacks and stuff out of new systems that were just produced from a combination of multiple supply chain companies, and they found through bug bounties that there were bugs in those systems, and that the hardware that they purchased was compromised. So that has been a big plus. Also, right now we have going on DEF CON, Black Hat and DEF CON is an international hackers event that's sponsored every year, and for the US anyway, it's first week of August out in Las Vegas. But it's also in Europe and in Asia and Australia. Right now they have an event called Hack the Satellite. So they're actually, the Air Force and Space Force are using hackers right now for the next today until Sunday to actually go through and try and hack satellites. And the Space Force is looking at it as a way to improve their security on their systems. Also, Blue Origin and SpaceX, the space companies by Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos from Amazon, they have the same concepts out there for being able to try and hack their satellites and hack their processes. So those are major, not only governments, but also major international companies that are actually paying hackers to be able to improve their security. And if the hacker starts making money legitimately, the hope to a lot of the people is that, well, maybe they'll go straight and realize that they can make as much money and be able to actually use that money to buy a house or buy other things that they can legitimately buy, where as a hacker, it's really tough to be able to spend your money once you get it. So that's what we've been doing here in the US for the last few years anyway.
That's really interesting. I don't know if either one of you watched the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, Catch Me If You Can, where he plays the gentleman who writes all these bad checks, and then apparently he was used by the government after he was caught to track people who were writing bad checks. So bad guy turned good guy. Interesting story. Yeah. So I do want to invite other viewers to start submitting questions. I do have a few more, but we have about 18 minutes, so I don't want to take up all the time. The next question that I wanted to ask the both of you is, what are the cybersecurity skills gaps that you're seeing? And then how can these gaps be filled? Iulian, would you like to go first?
Yeah. So if today we don't see any gap, there will be at least one tomorrow. And this is because the technology and the complexity of everyday challenges are growing so fast that it's almost impossible to keep the pace. And in fact, the attackers are most of the times ahead of the investigators, because this is their job, find always new ways to attack. So I think it is important to pay attention to what is happening every day in this field and have an open mind to cooperate and to be as creative as possible, because the gaps are always there. That's the answer. Okay, either you don't have people, either the people that you have didn't know about the vulnerabilities or about the threats or about the technical means that the attackers are using today. Either they didn't think that, because they don't have the predictive analysis, that the attackers might think to attack another target that you never thought about. So these are gaps that you find them every day, and there are a lot of them. And it's never possible to cover all these gaps. But once you have communication and cooperation between the parts, once you have cooperation also at the international level, yeah, we talk to each other, we exchange indicators of compromise, we change expertise. Look, I have found this and I didn't know how to do that. How did you do with that? Or I have young people who work with me, I can help you with this. This helps a lot, identifying new gaps, understanding the existing ones, and then try to cover them, and also think to what can happen tomorrow, and you cannot predict it today.
Jerry, you want to add?
Sure, real quick. There are a number of skills gaps that we have in pretty much all the areas across the board, from application development to cloud to networking. But the biggest area that I'm seeing is, like what Iulian was just mentioning, it's the overall picture. And it takes a decade for people to learn to understand the networking process, and then to understand the coding development process, and then to understand application and the cloud and data centers and all the other stuff that goes along with that, and the edge of our network and the tablets and the smartphones and everything else. But to be able to step back and look at that as a full ecosystem and understand, okay, we have security here, 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 and here, but where are the gaps within this entire ecosystem? And where are our ingress points and where are egress points? And how do we secure those? And it's the big picture understanding that I think we're having the biggest gap on, because all of our networks are just increasing in size tenfold, it seems, every week. Moore's law says that information and technology will double every 18 months. So what we're learning, what people start at in college, by the time they get out of college, the technology is already doubled or tripled. By the time they get into the workforce and have a decade of experience, the chances of them being able to keep up with that type of accelerated growth without having a lifelong understanding that they have to learn. They have to open a book. They have to start reading the blogs. They have to start reading information from Interpol, from the FBI, from all sorts of other different types of news feeds on what the current attacks and stuff are out there. And then to sit back and think about it for a little bit, to noodle on what their current environment looks like and where their weak points are and how to mitigate those weak points. That's the biggest gap across the entire country, the planet, as far as I see. It's at the CISO level and being able to understand how to mitigate that. And when you try and present that to the board of directors or stakeholders and the government side, that, hey, I need $500,000 to plug these 3 holes, a lot of times you get laughed at until there's a compromise and they took $10 million. See, a couple $100,000 would have stopped that $10 million loss. So that's the biggest problem that we're having, is being able to get to that crossover from technology to understanding the threat, then to being able to articulate it in a dollars and cents a lexicon for the companies and for the government to understand what the risk actually is.
Jerry, you mentioned a little bit about what the COVID-19 new threats were in cybersecurity. Maybe you have some more to add to that, and also maybe Iulian can talk a little bit about what kind of new threats that you're seeing over there because of COVID.
Okay. One of the big things that COVID is really doing, and that's really changed how a lot of companies, especially here in the Springs or all government organizations, had always been really tight on what they allowed their employees to do. And they fully believed that their network stops at their front door. Well, a couple months ago, that was turned on its head and everybody was told to go home and work from home. So now the 4 people that were managing the network, which was fine in an office building that was 2 floors and had 200 people in it, now those 200 people are scattered across not only the city, but the state. And a lot of times they're traveling here, there, and everywhere else, or they're working from their lake cabin that's in 3 states away. The edge of their network has gone from the front door to everywhere. And then the other problem that we run into is that when people are inside the building and inside their cube or inside their office, they are remembered about security, remembered about operations security, OPSEC. When they're at their house and the company computer is on the dining room table, they don't often remember that. And a lot of times the password and stuff that they've been using, and the system that they've been using is now, they're allowing their kids on it to be able to do their kids' homework because they didn't have a second computer at the house, because all the kids are now having to do all of their schooling from home. So they're using the same either government or company computer to do multiple different things. And then when the kid's done with doing his homework, they go out to their gaming sites, not realizing the gaming sites are actually watering hole attack vectors for a lot of the criminal organizations around the planet. So all of a sudden now the kid that has access onto the government laptop and is using it for schoolwork, which if his parents are there is not right, but it happens. But then they use that to go out to the watering hole, out to the game site, and that system is then being compromised. So then the following day, when the parents log back into it to send unclassified but for official use only information back and forth, or for companies their balance sheets and stuff like that, that information all of a sudden is now being picked up by the hackers around the planet and is able to be exploited. That's one of the biggest things. Not to mention, phishing attacks have gone up 900%, and with focused target on the stimulus checks. But there's the second side of that, of the network boundaries of not being in place anymore. So the network and security personnel from every organization needs to really up their game to be able to keep their networks and their infrastructure safe. So back over to you.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that? What kind of new
Yeah.
threats are you seeing in Romania?
Just a few summarizing thoughts. I was thinking of this question, and I think so the answer is my answer is the threat is more or less the same. Attackers accesses your devices and your data for different reasons. That's the basics of a cyber attack. The way that threat manifests becomes more and more worrying. And here we have the big difference between the two sides, the attackers and us. The attackers do not have too many limits. They can be as creative as possible. Most of the time, they have enough money to do what they need in order to carry out the attacks. They just have to be careful not to be caught. They don't have legal limits. They don't have legal prescriptions. And there is no one there to say, hey, this is not good. They will say, hey, you have to make money for me, or hey, you have to steal secrets for me. But then when it comes to us, or to the other side, those who fight with the attackers, we can meet a lot of limitations. We meet the limitations of funding, for example. We meet the limitations of legal provisions, because maybe the law doesn't give us the possibility, for example, to turn a hacker down, or to, to do other things or other operations that will help us, get closer to the attacker, to the attacking entity. Sometimes, or most of the time, it's lack of understanding of the importance of the cyber threats at the level of the users. As Jerry said, you have this new situation where people are going home with their laptops, or they have to work from their laptops, and they are not aware, and maybe they don't care about the security measures. And they just find themselves, and with all the data of the company or the institution that they work for, leaking out to the, I don't know, different entities, criminal or state or whatever hacktivist entities. And they don't know how this happened. And then on the other side, you have the administrators or the security responsibles cannot doing almost anything because they don't have the funds, then don't have the understanding of the people, and then don't have the means to protect the company. So what I'm really afraid of the creativity of the hackers and of the attackers, and also I'm afraid of our ignorance. When we talk about us, we talk about us, the normal or the average persons that can be targeted of the attackers. These are two things that are really worrying me. And especially in this COVID period, all these things increased, both the creativity and both not necessarily the ignorance, but the danger of not understanding the threat, the cyber threat.
Thank you. I did get a question from the audience. I'm going to read that, and either one of you can chime in to answer. It says, a couple of days ago, the city of Lafayette paid $45,000 to hackers who are holding the city's data hostage. Lafayette's phone service, email, and online payment and reservation systems were attacked. The city determined that in the cost-benefit scenario of rebuilding the city's data versus paying the ransom option outweighed attempting to rebuild. How worried should we be about attacks on our municipal and other systems and possible effects on public services?
I would like to begin, if possible, and I would begin with a question. Did they receive the data back after they paid? Because when you pay, yeah, okay, that's the first question. When you pay, it's not sure that you'll receive back the data or all the other information that the attackers have stolen from you. And yes, we have to be concerned about that, because as I said previously in my answer, one of the things that I'm afraid of, it's the lack of understanding. It's the lack of understanding of what this cyber threat means to everyday life and for every one of us. If it's, I had a very good colleague and a friend that used to say that if it's not blood on the walls, people will not understand. We are not talking, when it comes to cyber attacks, we are not talking about blood on the walls. We talk about information going through cables. You cannot see, you cannot feel, you cannot touch even. okay? And the danger is the most of the people think that if you cannot see it, it doesn't exist. If you cannot feel it or hear it, it doesn't exist. No, it exists. And sometimes it provokes damages that are, bigger and, much higher than, when you see blood on the walls, because you don't know what happens. It can be only red paint, for example. So yes, we can expect to these types of attacks. And the big problem is it's not that these attacks are happening. They will be, and the attacks are always there. We have, millions of attacks, of cyber attacks every day. They are there. And these things is not going to change. It's going to increase. And this is for sure, as long as we'll have the internet and we have the laptops and the PCs and so on. But the problem is, how much are we really aware of this threat? And as long as we are not aware, and as long as, the decision makers are not aware, and they're not aware that they have to apply security measures in order to protect the data, there will always be this problem. Okay, this would be all from me.
Jerry, would you like to add anything?
Real quick, yes. Atlanta also went through this not too long ago, and I believe the hackers wanted $100,000 in ransom, and Atlanta decided that no, we're not going to pay $100,000. So far they've spent roughly $3 million to recover and restore all of their equipment. A lot of the stuff was actually physically broke where they couldn't get back into it, but they've spent roughly 30 times that amount to try and actually restore it as opposed to paying a ransom. One of the things we have seen over the last few years that when a ransomware attack does happen and a ransom is paid, the keys are returned and the data is restored. Whether or not that allows them to be susceptible, because the problem is, if you go back to your last known good and go back through and patch everything, that's also the attacker's last known good because he was able to compromise it before. So if you go through and do restore your data, you actually need to dramatically increase your protection capabilities across the entire network, and figure out how they got in, employ digital forensics investigators to determine how they got in and what was the avenues of attack and how they actually went about doing the encryption of all your systems. So unless the companies or countries or cities actually go through and do that, they're just setting themselves up for another one coming down the road.
We have just a few minutes left. I would like to end this on a positive note. So if there's any, silver lining or happy thought at the end of this, or before we end this, can you share like maybe something that's positive happening in the cybersecurity world?
Yeah, I think one of the most positive things that is happening is this meeting that we have now. So because it really shows, the openness and the understanding and the level of the understanding of the importance of the cybersecurity, and also the cooperation that can be done and can be realized with so many miles away, but still we have the same thoughts, we have the same objectives, we have the same ideas, and that will help us strengthen the cybersecurity.
Definitely. I definitely have to agree 100% with that. It also has really improved how people are able to telework and how people are able to improve a lot of times their work-life balance by actually being able to work from home. And you're correct. And being able to communicate back and forth like this from thousands of miles away, we're able to do that a lot more, especially actually since COVID hit. We're using and leveraging technology far, far more than we were back around the first of the year. So this has really improved across the board how we're doing things. It allows us to understand that technology is location independent. So I can be at my lake house up in Canada and be able to do work just as well as I can anywhere else from the office here in Colorado Springs. And it works just as well. And I'm sure Iulian feels the same from over there, that we're able to leverage our technology as opposed to leveraging location. And this is really helping everybody across the board. And also one last thing, the entry into cyber is extremely low. So one of the things we were talking about, anybody that picks up from a smartphone to a laptop for $200 is able to get into the cyber field and actually start progressing, start learning, start doing things. Whereas opposed to if you want to race cars or fly airplanes or downhill ski or snowboard, you're looking at thousands of dollars for entry into that activity. This is a couple $50 or $100, a couple €100, and you're able to get in and actually learn and become effective and actually be a world player for very, very minimum amount of upfront money.
That's a great thought to end on. We're actually a minute over time, and I want to respect everyone's time, morning and evening. I want to give my greatest thanks to our speakers. Thank you so much for joining in, Iulian from Romania, and to Jerry for joining us today also. If you would like to join our mailing list or to see what other programs we have on the calendar, please visit our website, csworldaffairs.org. You may also see what's happening on our Facebook and Twitter pages. I do have a program scheduled for Thursday, September 17th with Ambassador Gina Abercrombie Winstanley, and then another program scheduled for October 1 with General James Clapper Jr., former Director of National Intelligence. We hope that you will join us for that. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you also.
Out here.